units, and certificates. No matter if you teach children at a preschool or an elementary level, or at a high school or tertiary education level. Even if you are a corporate trainer training adults, we have professional development courses for you. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for early access to FREEJOO version 2 today at akadasia.com and get in queue to receive a free lifetime membership for FREEJOO. What's more, if you sign up today, you will even receive access to 10 professional development programs for free. Sign up today. Visit www.akadasia.com and join FREEJOO, the global community of educators. Welcome to FREEJOO, the global community of educators. Are you an educator who finds it difficult to engage the Gen Z learner? Are you finding it a challenge to make full use of technology for teaching and learning? Are you of the belief that good instructional design means that we need to upload text and presentation materials, videos, and quizzes onto a learning management system? Or are you still teaching all your classes using video conferencing systems? If so, then FREEJOO is the place you should be at. FREEJOO is a community of educators by educators. Here, you can network with educators from all around the world, collaborate on projects, exchange ideas, access the best competency-based professional development courses which help you enhance your pedagogical and technical skills as a 21st century educator. Learn to use digital tools which enable you to design your lessons easily and quickly, and so much more. Join more than 100,000 educators from more than 35 countries and get access to a wide variety of competency-based professional development courses which you can complete at your own time and at your own pace. What's more, the courses are available in several different languages and come with CPD units and certificates. No matter if you teach children at a preschool or an elementary level, or at a high school or tertiary education level. Even if you are a corporate trainer training adults, we have professional development courses for you. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for early access to FREEJOO version 2 today at akadasia.com and get in queue to receive a free lifetime membership for FREEJOO. What's more, if you sign up today, you will even receive access to 10 professional development programs for free. Sign up today. Visit www.akadasia.com and join FREEJOO, the global community of educators. Hi, Rex. Can you just unmute your mic?
Sorry about that. Oh, tech. Can you hear me? Okay. Hi. Okay. So, hi, teachers. It's our first time to do StreamYard. Forgive us. Yeah. So, good morning, good day, good afternoon, magandang hapon, maayong hapon. I think a lot of teachers are from Region 9. Namaskar. Salamat siyang. I'm Raquel Cabrieto, Head of Community Engagement and Development in Akadasia. So I'm delighted to be with all of you here. Sorry, I think my screen is also a bit choppy, but I'm delighted to be with all of you here to welcome you on our new series, which is with the theme Teachers as Lifelong Learners. So really excited because I think right now we have 12,500 registrants from 75 different countries. Also, I'm excited to listen in with you to the conversation of our global panel of educators. So in line with this, let me introduce you to our CEO, Nilesh Bhatia, who has 30 years of experience, extensive experience in education, technology, media, um, media, and entrepreneurship. Um, she is the driving force for FREEJOO's community of global educators. So take it away, Neil.
Thank you, Rex. Uh, Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're from. Welcome again to Akadasia's virtual fireside chat today, and it promises to be a very exciting topic. Last couple of months, we were running a theme on 21st century education, and over the I think 4 or 5 different events that we had more than 30,000 teachers who had signed up from 90 odd countries over the last 2 months. Today, we start a new theme with teachers as lifelong learners. And today's theme is very, very important. We will be talking about the future of education and how do we help teachers stay relevant. Because, of course, with all the advances in technology, there are a lot of things that can be automated. So in such a scenario, how do we keep teachers relevant? So that's the topic for today. And I hope all of you will find this very insightful discussion. So without much ado, let me introduce you to all the panelists. So the first up, we have Dr. Preman Rajalingam, who's the Director for Center for Teaching, Learning, and Pedagogy at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Originally trained as an engineer, Dr. Rajalingam has been teaching in various tertiary education contexts since 2004. And after receiving his PhD in education psychology from Monash University in Australia, he joined NTU a year later as one of the pioneer faculty members at the Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine, where he took on various management positions, culminating in the role of Assistant Dean of Education Development. As Assistant Dean, he was responsible for faculty development, digital learning, and consulting on curriculum development for medical education, and was instrumental in the team-based learning at the school. He was appointed Director of Center for Teaching, Learning, and Pedagogy in January 2020, leading both the faculty department team and teaching and learning strategies team. His current research interests include the science of learning, underpinning active collaborative approaches, and the evolving roles of teachers in higher education. As an expert in the use of active collaborative learning approaches, he regularly conducts local and international workshops and as a sought-after educator. And rightly so, he's here with us today to share his in-depth knowledge and insights about this topic. Thank you, Dr. Praman, for joining us. Really
Thanks.
Happy to see you here.
Thanks, Nilesh, for the kind introduction.
Next, we have with us, and she's been here before. She's no stranger to us. She's already part of the family. And it is Miss Gail Rosen, the founder and chief makerologist from Makerology in Singapore. Gail is an inspired educator, artist, and a geek girl, always focused on fusing her passions for art and science. She worked for innovative companies in the early 1980s, who paved the way for the technology used in digital imaging today. At the very beginning of the digital arts revolution, she became a consultant to Fortune 500 companies, teaching their advertising designers how to creatively design using the new technology tools. Eventually, she navigated back to her art education roots, and after receiving a Master's of Art Education and New Media Technology, she became a teaching mentor for the International Arts Science Prize Program for high schools through university students founded at Harvard University. And through that, she's met teachers and students from Singapore, Singapore's various secondary schools, and she has now moved to Singapore and heads her own company at Makerology. And she guides teachers and students through transdisciplinary hands-on making that sparks curiosity, creativity, and joyful learning. And Makerology Studio empowers lifelong learners of any age by making learning visible. Hi, Gail. Welcome back.
Hi. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. Next, we have on the panel is Dr. Eddie Horton, who is the Associate Professor and Department of Computer Information Systems from Northwestern State University in the US. Dr. Horton is an Associate Professor. His primary teaching and research interests include networking and information security and ethical hacking. He currently serves as President of the Association of Business Information Systems and holds several industry certifications from CompTIA, Cisco, Microsoft, and Dell. When not at work, Dr. Horton is active with a local Mardi Gras crew, enjoys spending time with all four of his four-legged children, and makes a pretty awful drone pilot. Hi, Dr. Eddie. Welcome to the chat today. Really nice to have you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And just so that everybody knows, it's 2 or 3 in the morning where you're at?
It's 2 a.m. here, so.
Well, it's very kind of you to join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we also have the fourth panelist with us, Dr. Cheryl Lynn C. Monterola, who's a professor from University of the Philippines, Diliman campus. Plus, she's also the executive director at Center of Integrated STEM Education, or SYSTEM, in the Philippines. Dr. Cheryl also collaborates with ILO in the Philippines for its Women in STEM Workforce Readiness and Development Program. And in 2016, she was a visiting scholar at NIE Singapore, Office of Education Research. Welcome to the chat, Dr. Cheryl.
Hi, Neelish. It's great to be here. Good afternoon, everyone.
So thank you for joining us, all the panelists. And of course, last but not the least, I have not only our Chief Academic Officer, but also a very, very good friend of mine, Dr. Kirsten Bartels, who has been a dean at Northwestern before, and now she's here with us as Chief Academic Officer. And we are so happy and thankful to have her as part of our team. And she will be the host for today. Kirsten, all yours.
Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you for those kind words. And welcome, everyone. Eddie, good morning. I think I'm an hour ahead of you. I appreciate you being willing to be up in the middle of the night. And those of you who are coming from around the world, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. This is a really, really exciting topic, and we have wonderful people that we are going to discuss it with. So let's get started. The first thing, I think none of us can say that technology has not impacted our world. We wouldn't be what we're doing right now had technology not advanced. So my first question is, how has technology impacted your work in education? And how do you see it impacting it going forward? Gail, please.
So I think it's impacted everything about how I teach and how I learn. This is about lifelong learners. And I think it looks like I'm probably the oldest one here. I'm version 6.7. So it's impacted how I research and develop content and the delivery method. Which in turn, it's like a game of dominoes, which has impacted my students. And how they create, how they document, how they share, and not just among themselves, but among all stakeholders, maybe with other students or classes or their parents or family. So I think that I look at EdTech tools, sort of like a spice in the kitchen. And all the tools we use are like spices in the kitchen. And the EdTech tools add another flavor to what we're doing. The thing that I want to say before we move on to the next person is that I know for some people this is a little scary. It's okay to be afraid. That's what our students feel. We have to model what that's like for them as well. But we all need to get in the pool and swim, because students of all ages are already free diving into the deep end. but we want them to be in the right deep end. So if we can guide or facilitate so they're not swimming among sharks, I think that that's important. And for each person, when they hear EdTech, and if you're not involved in the moment and using those tools, it sounds like a really big thing. But the idea in anything is to just really baby steps, just one thing at a time, one small thing, one small impact. It doesn't mean changing a whole curriculum. Maybe it's 5 minutes in a lesson to start with, that you're doing something different where you're integrating technology. So that's...
I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, we need to go and take these steps, which for some of us, they are terrifying. But you know, how can we expect other people to go and take steps if we're not willing to lead and to try ourselves and to fail?
Big time.
There's the key. I think you have to not be afraid of failing. I know, you know, for example, for here at Northwestern, we've got a lot of older faculty. And, you know, to make it very relevant, COVID threw everyone sort of under the bus. You're going to be doing this online and you're going to be doing it right now. And quite a few of our faculty were just terrified of the idea. And now, you know, a year into it, if you will, even our faculty that were terrified of it feel better at it because they've decided that, you know what, things screw up, internets drop. It may drop on one of us in the middle of this conversation. It happens. You just got to pick it up and go back with it and not be afraid of the technology itself.
If I'd like to jump in here as well. I
Please.
think technology definitely has influenced the way I've approached teaching. As a lot of my work has been in collaborative learning, specifically team-based learning. And I think in some ways, even way before this pandemic, it's actually accelerated collaborative learning, because what it does is it allows the work done by groups of students to be made very visible, right? I think in the past, we've always had group work. We've always had people working away in teams. And I think that's probably going to stay with us as long as we are social beings. But what technology has done is allowed that work now to be made visible to a high level, made visible to a teacher, etc. Since the pandemic, I think we've all now used technology. But what I feel slightly worried about is that the technology we're focused on is very much then again the teacher broadcasting to the students. And we may have accelerated that bit of technology quite quickly, but I don't see the technology around groups of students working in teams accelerating as fast.
I think I have the same idea as Dr. Perman, that we pretty much put ourselves in front of the camera and taught our students. But beyond that, we have to think about, you know, bringing students together, collaborate together. In that way, we're really turning around what we call learning and development for everyone. So, but we have to be a bit forgiving about, you know, the speed by which we approach all of these things, because one might be faster than the other compared to other students, and we have to be forgiving. We have to be the compassionate others for some, probably a gentle nudger for others, and so on. But basically, one thing that's very important that I see is to approach it with, you know, this openness to learning. Just free your mind. Just be accepting of, you know, some failures. If you think, for example, that you're doing great, and you show it to your colleague and say, I know that a long time ago, but it's a great thing that you have your own pace of learning, and you're arming yourselves with all of these tools. And the fun way to do it is really immerse in it and find joy in whatever you're doing, as Gail said earlier.
Well, and there are lots of different ways to go about that. And it's funny because not that long ago, I think all of us have been in a position where we're in front of a class and technology didn't work. And who would help us out? We would have the students come up and they, you know, they'd sort of roll their eyes and they would help us. And we can't do that anymore. We no longer, if we're going to be relevant, we can't always ask the students to bail us out. So we have to show that we're willing to learn as well. And one way that I think all of us have learned of various different things is by going to YouTube. You know, how do you change a light bulb in your car? How do you do these things? You Google it, you YouTube it. In the world where information and instruction is so freakishly readily available, where students just have to type in anything. How do we make sure teachers stay relevant? Are teachers still relevant, I guess, is the first question.
That's such a great question, because, you mentioned YouTube, and it's a great example. I teach primarily technology, and there is such a wealth of information out there. And you've often got to explain to students what it is you can bring to the table that they can't get from YouTube. Because the reality is, for a lot of, especially in the technology arena, they can get out there and learn the skill. They don't really understand why they need all these other classes. Why do I need these business classes to go on top of this when I can say I want to learn Python? I can get on YouTube and I can watch classes about Python and learn Python.
Right. I think it's about also, in agreement with you, it's also about transferring the information. So I learn a lot. I'm an independent learner. And so I do learn a lot from watching YouTubes or, however I do online. There's no greater joy for me, though, actually, because I'm very much of an analog digital girl. I'm a unibrain, than being in the presence of somebody that's actually showing me something in real time. There's an energy that we can transfer through the digital world. We watch movies that have great emotion. But being in a room with somebody else has not, for me, yet been totally replicated online. But the thing that we need, as Dr. Horton was talking about, is we need to be able to transfer this. You can put a person who doesn't have great sight in a Lamborghini and somebody who has fantastic sight in a small Fiat, and the Fiat's going to drive away and the Lamborghini is going to crash. So it's being able to not just know stuff. It's not just what you know, but it's what you do with what you know. And that's where I think teachers come in. And then there's this other thing that we call soft skills. We talked a little bit about accepting and embracing failing, or what I call falling forward. Resilience, compassion, collaboration, all those things. I'm not sure how much can be taught without a teacher guiding, somebody who has that experience.
I want to build on something you said, Gail, and I think I agree with everything, all those terms you just brought up. But another thing which teachers are essential for is feedback, right? And the ability to give individualized feedback to your students at the right time, following an instruction. And I can foresee one day where maybe AI gets as good as the feedback as it, that it's no it doesn't seem any different from a teacher. So maybe this is just an interesting idea which popped into my head. Should AI get to that point where it can display compassion, display good feedback, why should the students listen to that feedback? They may not care about it, right? So because it doesn't come from a real person.
Stanford is actually doing tests on that right now. They have a huge test that you probably know about it. I just recently read about it in the New York Times, where they are doing individualized feedback and trying to make it sound very human. But I think the essence of that whole article was they're still not there yet. But to your point, do they need to get there?
And even if they get there, I mean, we all know students, the moment they know it's not a real person, they'll try to break it.
Yeah, I perfectly agree with Brahman, because nowadays, even though you have your classes, students will still look for, that connection, the check-ins that you schedule, because they want to hear someone affirm their beliefs, probably validate what they're feeling, really get in touch with, although it's virtual, but have that sense of connection with someone else. And also, I'd like to build on Eddie's information. Say what was Eddie saying earlier about the wealth of information. Yes, it's a vast resource, really, but teachers will still be relevant if we're able to curate the right materials for our students. Because chances are that they will not get to the right materials because there are a lot to look at if you don't, sort of provide them with that efficiency to, hey, these are the curated materials based on your profile, based on your interests, probably based on how I understand you. So this will get you to, better results. And so I think in a way, as a curator and probably as a steadfast cheerer to our students, we will still remain relevant, even with the technology.
Well, you bring up a good point. There's so much information out there, and there's so much misinformation out there, that in one way teachers, I think, are incredibly relevant is by helping students get those skills to know where to look, where to spot the information that is accurate and true, where to spot the information that isn't necessarily true. I mean, we like to joke about, you don't want to Google any medical condition because it's going to go horribly wrong for you. So I just think and the other thing that I wanted to bring up, it's not a question that I had prepared, but I was thinking about this as we were talking. With everything that is available, now more than ever, students are bombarded with perfection. How do you think AI and all the technology is going to impact the very real condition a lot of our students face, and that's the imposter syndrome, that they can't possibly ever be good enough? Do you think it'll have an impact?
I think it could lead us down a path, with AI, right? Especially where we stop treating individuals like human beings, and we stop realizing that education is a social process, right? It's a social process because essentially I'm learning stuff, I'm learning knowledge, I'm learning skills, but I like being there. I like talking to my friends. I'm doing certain things because this teacher is funny, right? I think AI would go down the route of optimization. It's trying to optimize every interaction it has with a student. And I think if we're not careful, it can be quite dehumanizing, right? And people would either, just it's always pushing you to do better and better and better, or I just don't care about the AI anymore. It's not human. It doesn't give me any real pleasure from interacting with it. It's a simulation, right? So I choose to disengage. So that's my post-apocalyptic view of where AI would take us. Yeah,
I think that's such a great true view of how things are. You mentioned AI and optimization. I think the reality of it is it could over optimize a conversation. AI is definitely not going to have that human touch. Just even little nuances. I just said talking here. Those are things that AI are not going to do, and I don't think people are going to react the same way. I don't think they ever will react the same way.
But if we're on YouTube, we're interacting with AI.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on any of the social platforms, you are interacting with AI. So AI is actually more in our lives than we might be aware of. And I sit on the fence right now with AI. I think I initially have come to it from where Eddie and Praman are both coming to it, which is this sort of apocalyptic, kind of view, because there's this thing called Singularity. And the Singularity is a movement of thought where it's believed that the ongoing evolution of man and machine are going to become more and more hybrid. It is in some respects happening in the medical field. I know, Praman, you have a background, I think, more medical education as well. And there are things being implanted in people's bodies. Recently, there was a guy who had electrodes in his brain that sort of connected to the vibration of his vocal cords, and he was paralyzed, but he was able to talk through his computer, through a port that he was connected to. So there are extraordinary things happening. Where AI is incredible is in the collection and manipulation of enormous amount of data. And so that's where it excels beyond the human capacity. But with all these things, I always have the ethical little bird chirping in my head. I mean, what also makes AI incredible is, and I know, Neelish, you like to use this word a lot, democratize, because that's what you're trying to do with Akadasia, is democratize education. And AI does that because it's known that the human brain has about 180 different biases. And supposedly in AI, you're not approaching that with racism, with all those other biases.
Depends what the programmers programmed it
Yes,
with.
it depends on who's writing the algorithm. I totally get it. So in the singularity, in that movement, the idea is that someday AI is going to overreach and dominate the human species, and potentially might look at the human species as a mosquito and go, you're out of here. I think it's inevitable for me at some point. But it's always this ethical thing that I see all the benefits of AI in so many ways. It offers so many fantastic things in how we approach things. But that ethics little thing that's talking in my head all the time, a glitch in a program can erase or take people subtly down the wrong path while learning. And so those are the kinds of the things that I'm concerned with. But right now, the current HTML flatness of the LMSs that we have need to transform somehow into a more dynamic space to teach and learn. And AI is going to be there, is already there. So I think how it's governed, how it's managed is going to make the difference. But I sit right on this fence. I hear everything that everybody's saying. But Cheryl, I think you used a key word also, and that's curate, because I see myself as a curator. I think all teachers are natural curators. That's what they do all the time. They sift through a lot of information and they sort of pick and choose what they deliver. And so
And I think that's where I agree with you, Gail and Cheryl. I mean, certain things which just boring for the teacher to do, like sift through lots of information. I think the AI should be doing that for us. To bring it back to the question, would AI make teaching redundant? Would it make like the ability to give feedback? I doubt, because it may. There are certain roles which a teacher enjoys doing and the students enjoy receiving from a real person, right? And I think maybe our applications of AI should focus on the stuff we find boring and don't want to do, right? And save us, save our time for the things that we enjoy doing and there is some intrinsic reward from doing.
AI can grade the papers. Let us lecture. Let us do the interaction.
Yeah.
I'd like to go ahead, Neil.
Go ahead, Cheryl. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I'd like to say that I'd like to sit with on the fence with Gail about it, because as we said, we have to harness the benefits of AI, but we also have to understand its limitations in a sense and leverage on that. So the insights, for example, of a domain expert would still be needed. And although you have the models, you have the algorithms, but someone who's already familiar with the domain can, add insight and really contextualize how it's going to be powerful when you apply it, let's say, on how you solve a certain problem. So I think in that sense, there's no doubt that will still be relevant, and we just have to position ourselves very well.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could just jump in there, and for all the panelists, except for Gail, of course, Gail already knows this, but I usually jump in as a devil's advocate. All right, so I've got some crazy ideas and things which I might kind of, like to kind of get you involved in and hear your insights on. So here's the thing, what Dr. Eddie mentioned earlier, that it'll be very difficult for AI to replace us because of the nuances in how we talk and how we communicate and all of that stuff. I think if you look at the current generation of students, it might be a whole different ball game for them, because the current generation, the digital natives, as we call them, they are more comfortable talking to AI than talking to human beings. And that's a fact. You can't deny that, right? I mean, they are more comfortable in that social space, typing away, talking away, playing games. They don't even know who they are talking to when they are playing all these kind of games.
Can I disagree with you, Nilesh, a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I think they're quite happy interacting seamlessly, but I think there's something fundamental. The moment you realize, right, that this thing you're interacting with is a simulation of a human being, not a real human being, you're not going to react to, and it can be a perfect simulation of a human being. The student is not going to react the same way to that human being
Sure.
as they are going to react to a human teacher.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is this. Right now, perhaps that may be the case, but I'm just let's kind of fast forward 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, right? Where you have more and more and more people coming in, and I mean, if you look at, Dr. Priman, in Singapore, you go out for dinner and you see families will just give an iPad to the kid to just keep the kid quiet, right? They don't engage in dialogue. They do not engage in conversation with their kids. And this I see, unfortunately, happening more and more and more with families. And so the kids are pretty much used to being on their own, doing their own thing, finding their own information. And I've also seen situations where kids as young as 3 and 4 are telling their parents, oh, this is how you do this and this is how you do that on an iPad or whatever, right? So again, let's put ourselves in the shoes of, say, 20, 30, 40 years down the line, the next generation when they come in. Do you think that there may be a time where they actually prefer digital interactions rather than human? Because that is just the way people are attuned to it. I mean, that's the way they've been grown up. That's the environment that they've grown up in. So, any comments on that?
It's very Blade. It's sorry, just
no,
it's
please,
very Blade Runner. I wanted to say, if you knew that, could you fall in love with an android, right? Knowing it was an android, being a perfect android. I don't know. I think it's an interesting philosophical question. On one end is, of course, the generation of people who are growing up more accepting of other kinds of interactions, but then we have millions of years of evolution behind us where we're social beings. So I don't know. My sense is I think if I were to bet, I would say it would have to be an entity which I recognize as a like another human being. If it was a machine, it won't get the same reaction from me.
Well, speaking of falling in love with an android or an AI, I mean, I know there are a lot of cases in Japan, for example, where kids are falling in love with anime characters right now. It's already happening. But Gail, yes, you have something to.
So I kind of you can agree with kind of everybody on different levels. Praman, you actually said a couple times that students might not enjoy feedback from AI. And Neelish, before you responded to that, I was actually going to say something very similar. From our perspective, I can see where we would think that. But these are the young generation, the digital natives, are sometimes sitting in the same room with each other and they're texting.
There you go.
They're sitting across, come on, right, Eddie? You're sitting across the room from each other and they will not get up. Now, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't learn how to do that, but that's the choices that they're making now. We wish it was different. And so I kind of agree with Neelish on this in some respects, that I think that they're more comfortable, unfortunately, more comfortable. I don't think it's a good thing necessarily 100%, that they do feel that comfortable with being one step removed from real time. It's safer, there's more anonymity sometimes, whatever it is. And I worry about that, for the future. But when we start talking about 20 or 30 years from now, and there was some question that was sent to us as panelists, where do you think education is going to be, in 5 years, a classroom and all that kind of stuff? Whenever I hear a question with 5 years in it, my answer is always, it hasn't been invented yet. Whatever we're going to be doing, there'll be some version. We like to superimpose our current situations and circumstances with an upgrade when we think about 5 years. But some of the things that are here now will be gone. So it's not about the tools, but more about our mindset and how we adapt along the way to these different things.
I think they're always going to prefer that digital interaction these days, but I think they want it with a human being. You mentioned, they're wanting to text across the room, and that's 100% what you see kids do, but they want to do it with another person. They don't necessarily want to do it with a computer.
Well, I joke, my son, he got me into watching F1. My son despises driving. He hates driving. In fact, when I gave him a car, he rolled his eyes at me. He couldn't believe I was forcing him to, get his license and drive. He's a terrible driver. Don't ride with him. But he's brilliant as an F1 driver. And he, on Thursday afternoons, does this virtual racing with people from around the world. They have a team, or I guess they have 10 different teams, and they interact and they live stream this. And it's much like we're doing right now, but they're doing this simulation of F1 racing. So they're combining technology and they're working in the virtual world, but they're still interacting. They still are thriving off each other. So I think we will always, always want that. And as far as, when we find out it's an AI, I remember I was reading a book, The Wall, and I thought I was invested because I thought it was a true story. And I was about halfway through it, and it's a thick book. And then I found out that no, it was fiction. And because I went into it thinking that this was a true story and these people actually existed, when I found out that it was fiction, I felt very betrayed. And I think that a similar thing could happen when they find out that it's not a real person. It's not going to be, oh, cool. It's going to be that they wasted their time. They didn't get the kind of relationship. And look at us, how desperate we were to get out of the virtual world and just get a hug or have a cup of coffee with someone. We still want that. They still want that.
Yeah. In my case, I agree with Kirsten that, I think the word there is diversity. It doesn't matter what kind of interaction it is. We will always root for interaction. But the key there is diversity. So when we get there, if, for example, we're bombarded with this kind of interaction, then we want to switch off and switch to another. And that makes it a bit, nicer and humane for us, perhaps. And then when it comes to, being sold to that, and then we want to switch to another, then I think it's always been switching back and forth, having a diverse experience, and just rooting for interaction, no matter what form it is.
So let me kind of pose another question to all of you, right? So if you look at the way we've been we've been teaching traditionally, chalk and talk, and let's not look at how we teach in our own institutions, because I know we all facilitate, we all have various ways to engage students, but I'm talking about your public school teacher or a high school teacher, all right? Maybe not even in an international school, right? Just a regular school somewhere in the middle of small town Vietnam, small town India, or small town Philippines, perhaps. Let's put ourselves in their shoes. They have been teaching in a certain way for the longest time. I think I might be slightly older than Dr. Praman and Dr. Eddie, but even then, I think that the way we learned in school must have been pretty much the same way, chalk and talk. You might have a teacher writing something down, speaking down to the students. After, when perhaps Roy and Rax went to school, that perhaps changed from chalk and talk to maybe a PowerPoint and talk, right? So you might have now a PowerPoint presentation, but you're still talking down to the students. Now, what you guys are talking about and saying that, that even though AI and machine learning and all of these things come in, teachers will still be relevant. But don't you think if the teachers continue doing the same thing that they've traditionally been doing for hundreds and hundreds of years, they eventually will lose students? Because, if you look at the current students, the way they are learning, the way they are communicating, the way they are finding information, they don't appreciate, at least to my knowledge, the whole chalk and talk routine. So in a scenario like that, if the teachers need to change, how do they change? What does it take to change? Go ahead.
So Nilesh, I think it's a really good point to bring up. I also wonder, I wonder whether it's always been like that for hundreds of years, because the chalk and talk phenomenon may be a post-industrial, education kind of thing where we had standardized classrooms and people had fixed curriculum to write in front. There's some old ideas like that about constructivism, where people have to construct their own knowledge, and social constructivism, where they construct their own knowledge in communities and groups, and these things have existed for a long time. So I think these things about the way people learn have remained true and have even happened in the chalk and talk classrooms. The students will break out and discuss, etc. I think that there may be an opportunity now, because of COVID and technology. We're probably in a fork in the road. We can go down chalk and talk multiplied by a million times to the rest of the world, or we can go down another route where we actually have bits of curated information, groups of people discussing with each other, enabled by technology. And I think we are at an interesting forking point, right? And some people will go down and say, let's just create lots and lots of content and videos and let's just broadcast it to as many people as we want, right? And there's another opportunity here to use that content and activities in different ways, so that people can interact with it, right? Make decisions about it, choices with it. And it will be used in a whole lot of different ways in different classrooms all around the world. And I think we need to, we are at an interesting point. So yeah, that's all I kind of have to say about that. But
I think the real answer there too is that there is a need for both. The chalk and talk, we can kind of put that to be YouTube now. My earlier example, I want to learn Python, I go watch some videos. That's pretty much what YouTube is about, just having those. But at the same time, other people and different types of learners are going to want more interaction. So I really think, unfortunately, the answer for us as educators is we're going to have to figure out how to do all of this at the same time.
I want to take it in a slightly different direction, though. Oh, go ahead, Gail, and then I want to bring up something.
I think we need to think about it possibly as an ecosystem of sorts. And there isn't just one way now. We just have more tools. But again, Cheryl, my favorite word you used before is curate, where teachers need to actually curate their own experience, not just the content that they're delivering. So, using what makes sense for you, don't use it just because you're supposed to use it, because you still need to be authentic in what you're doing.
Yeah. That's one of the things that we do in our teacher trainings, because we offer an array of tools, platforms, and techniques how to use them. But at the end of the day, we always tell our teacher participants that we are not imposing all of these techniques or all of these uses of tools, because at the end of the day, they know their teachers, their learners very well. So for example, if it's in a village, it's in a barrio, for example, in the Philippines, and they think that will not be useful, but the personal growth and the development of the teachers matter, so that they'll be able to see the big picture. It's not always, just be parochial about thinking about what's in front of them, but having this big picture that probably taking away something not exactly the same, but using that in their own context and making that powerful for their learners. So it's not always been whatever you see out there, it's exactly what you do in your own context.
I want to take this in a different direction, because we're talking about technology, and we're talking about how technology is, it's advancing. It might make teachers less relevant. It might do these other things. But one thing we haven't talked about yet is the idea of privilege. Because, we are all very privileged in the fact that we have access to this technology. I'm sitting in my home with dual monitors in front of me and ring lights and a green screen, talking to people literally from all over the world. We know that COVID has shown that these gaps in education that are linked to privilege are getting wider. How is technology going to, narrow those gaps, or do you think they're only going to continue to get worse? Gail, please.
I'm hoping, because I don't know for sure, so don't quote me on this. You have people like Elon Musk and Starlink, which is a network that they're launching off into space, and other companies trying to privatize that as well, where they're really trying to, for better or for worse, again, the Earth is not going to look so great from above with this whole layer of satellites. But what he's trying to do is to democratize to a certain degree, even though it's a private company, to make internet accessible to the most rural places. And I think as of this August, the only places that won't have internet connection is Antarctica. Potentially, I think that they're kind of covering the globe in some way, shape, or form. Now, of course, I think it always gets down to it's not the technology, Kirsten, and I think you bring up actually a good point on privilege and the divide is really about funding and resources. It doesn't matter. Technology is just another one of those tools. There are many resources that some schools that are struggling financially don't have access to. So we might have a global coverage of internet, but if the kids can't get a device in their hands, it kind of defeats the purpose. So I think that's the root of some of it is how do these things, how does it get funded? How does education get funded that's not private, that's not independent or chartered? But how does the average school or the struggling school in a village, how do they get funded? And then after that, then you could start talking about resources and technology. But I think it all gets down to funding.
Actually, Gail, I want to just cite our experience here in the Philippines because my work right now in the Department of Education is trying to explore that because the connectivity here in the Philippines is just 67%. And it's really a problem for rural areas. They don't have, the connectivity. They don't have the device. But what the Department of Education right now is doing is to redefine learning space and, make other learning partners and education stakeholders be part of the ecosystem. So we want, for example, museums to have the resources. We want the local government units or town mayors, city mayors, and so on to be part of the learning of the students because we realize that the department is, cannot really take it all in. So because we're dealing with 28 million learners and a million teachers, and the resources are not that big, and we really need the private sector and the government organizations to be part of that learning ecosystem. So that's what we are currently doing here. So redefining the learning space, taking everybody who'd like to be part of that ecosystem.
I love that
idea. Count us in. We're always there to support all the teachers in all these countries. So do count us in.
And as technology continues to grow, hopefully more and more machines that are cheaper will come out to kind of solve some of this gap. In fact, I'll just give you all an example. This is a Chromebook. This is just a really small Chromebook. We got some of these to try to give out to some students at Northwestern. We ended up paying $200 a piece for them.
Wow.
Can you stream on it? Yes. Can you play a game on it? Not really. But can you type a paper and take part in a class on it? Definitely. And I think that maybe when we get some things like Starlink and other things everywhere, maybe we can invest more in things like this to actually bring people on board. You mentioned the internet. Even here in the States, that's a big issue in rural places like where I live. We learned very quickly with COVID, as you mentioned, people don't have access around here. In fact, what they ended up doing, some of the buses have wireless on them here. And they literally made a schedule and told the different people in neighborhoods, the bus will be parked in your area from 4 to 5 o'clock on Tuesday. So you better get on your phone or internet and do your work at that time. It's something that I think a lot of us just take for granted. Internet is something at this point that we just are all used to, but there are people that don't have access to it, and we've got to remember that.
You raise a really interesting point, Eddie. I mean, education, it was not that long ago that education wasn't a fundamental human right? So maybe as education becomes intertwined with technology, connectedness becomes a fundamental human right. You have to provide a base level of the ability for people to connect with other people on some kind of internet.
And so what brings up an interesting point of that is you know that there are some cultures in the world, this isn't a judgment, this is just an observation, that do not believe that it is a right for, let's say, girls to have education, and sometimes boys too. So you open up a whole nother Pandora's box. Yes, I totally agree. That is the right of every human being to be able to explore, discover, share, and grow. But there are some cultures that don't see it that way, and that's also another interesting sideline to everything you're talking about.
Yeah, I've got something controversial to say. I don't know whether it's right platform. I think human rights trump cultural sensitivities, but that's where certain things, if we do decide that education is a right, and it reaches the point where education is hobbled by not having connection to some kind of internet, then it is a right.
No, of course, but it's implementing that in those challenging spaces. So, I mean, it's a whole sector that we're not even really talking about. When we're talking about all these other things, then we have cultural implications as well. So,
well, it's interesting because. Oh, go ahead, Neil.
No, go ahead, Kirsten.
Oh, I was going to say, and I want to ask all of you. Maybe this is true for you, and maybe it's not. But the role of the teacher. Why are teachers relevant? When I look back on my very long career as a student, and I pick the two most impactful teachers I've ever had, they both were in English. One of them was in high school, B.J. Burkhorst. He was phenomenal. And then it was Peter Barry, who was my PhD supervisor. And I wonder if it wasn't for B.J. Burkhorst, if I would have developed the love of English, if I would have gone on to pursue studies in English. So is that true for you? The fields that you went into, that you studied primarily, was it because of that one human being that took an interest in you, that saw something in you? Go ahead, Gail.
I'm so glad you're bringing that up. And I think that this is really a defining criteria in all of this, is that how many times, Kirsten, you just shared one story, but how many times have we all heard somebody say, if it wasn't for this one teacher, and sometimes there are family issues, and the teacher steps in and embraces that child in a whole nother way beyond education. I actually had the opposite, kind of. I was a good girl, quiet, never, believe it or not, never said anything. Yes, I know, hold on to your hats. I was a very quiet girl that sat in the back of the classroom, and no teacher ever partnered with me. They were more interested at that time in the kids that were really bright or misbehaving. And I was invisible pretty much almost all of my primary school education, elementary school, middle school, kind of towards the end of high school, I found my voice. But I almost went into, and I always got average grades, nothing spectacular. I didn't actually go to higher learning until all my friends were graduating. I did other things. It wasn't until I went for a teaching degree and did other things that I realized, actually, I'm an excellent student. And I was always an excellent student. I just didn't become an excellent student. But I never had a teacher that partnered with me. So I became actually very pissed off at the whole thing. And that's what sort of projected me into the trajectory of, formal education. But I share with kids now, if you're not doing okay in school for whatever reason, it doesn't fall all on you, because they all take it, whether it's helicopter parents or they all take it on themselves. It's like, I'm wrong, I'm broken, I'm the problem. I really am very upfront with them, saying that, yes, you need to there is accountability and you need to take responsibility for your learning, but there needs to be a partnership. And if your teachers are not partnering with you, then it's also on them. So I agree with you, Kirsten, that for many millions of probably students and people around the world, there was at least, maybe you had two, you lucky girl, but maybe for everybody, there was this one teacher that saw them in a special way that helped to project them into their trajectory.
And as teachers, I think we've got to be very careful on the opposite side of that. You know, when a student is not doing well in handling that situation properly, because while somebody gave you that love English, very well another teacher could have made someone hate it, and they just dropped out and didn't do anything because of one teacher as well.
Right.
It's that lesson that it's hard for me to remember all the time as an educator, and I have to constantly remind myself, you know, yes, this is the 8th paper you've read that's awful, but it's fine. You know, give them good feedback and try to help them with it. Don't just get angry about it.
Right. I don't think that, I'm sorry, Kirsten, I don't think that
No.
I haven't heard anybody say yet, there's this one machine experience that I've had that has made me who I am. I haven't heard that yet.
I need to apologize to Neil. I just looked at the clock.
Well,
we normally only chat about the questions that we have for about a half hour, and then we open it up to questions from the audience. And we've been chatting for like 54 minutes. So we're not going to have as much time for questions from the audience. That is completely my fault. I apologize if you had a question that you really wanted answered. I'm going to turn it over to Neil. So if he doesn't pick your question, it's not my fault, it's his.
Well, actually, before I pick the questions, and let me just quickly ask the panel, is the panel okay with us extending it by 15 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes? Are you all okay with it? Great.
Sure.
So, because I want to kind of, before I move into the Mentimeter questions, I have one other direction that I wanted to kind of get your insights on, which I think will be very important for the teachers who are watching this. We've been talking about technology challenges and, you know, how the teachers need to be, you know, better prepared to stay relevant and so on and so forth. But let's now look at the financial part of it. If you look at the current, you know, landscape, the salaries for teachers, generally speaking, have not gone up. In fact, they've gone down. When you start looking at inflation, when you take into account inflation over the last couple of decades, I think in the U.S., Dr. Horton, I think it's about 4.5% less. You know, teachers make 4.5% less today than what they were making a decade ago, for example.
Right.
The salaries have actually gone down, right? Now, in a scenario like that, where the salaries are going down, and now with COVID, you know, the business models of schools and universities are changing. A lot of universities and schools are looking to hire more adjunct staff rather than, you know, full-time staff to cut their expenses down. Parents are not willing to consider paying the same amount of fees like they used to before, because, you know, they say, hey, it's a blended experience. Why do I need, you know, if my kid's not going to be on the campus, why do I need to pay so much? So from a financial perspective, when you look at this, everything is basically becoming worse and worse if you're a teacher, right? So in a situation like that, what do you think teachers need to do today to reinvent themselves so that they can stay relevant when all hell breaks loose and, you know, basically everything is online, for example, if it goes online? What can teachers do today to keep themselves relevant, you know, over the next 20, 25 years? Because obviously, if you look at professional development, if you say, okay, you know, you need to upskill yourself, that's great. But then professional development is not cheap, unless you're signed on with us, of course. But that's a different matter. But generally speaking, professional development is expensive. Now, if as a teacher, if you're making less salary, if you're taking home less, how do you upskill yourself to keep yourself relevant? I mean, those are real challenges. Yes, Gail.
I think that you need to find a buddy. I think you need to find somebody in your life. Could be another teacher at school, but could be somebody in your family, could be your next door neighbor. Like, don't limit yourself. Could be somebody at the local library if you don't have the resources yourself. And I think in the same way we want the kids to ask for help, as grown-ups, I think we forget that Zen kind of mindset. I think asking for help is a great way to learn, sort of figure out like maybe what you don't know. And I know sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but think about one thing you'd like to do and what can't you do, or what don't you know about transferring that into a virtual world? And I would even up it a little bit and not only find a buddy to learn with, or maybe knows a little bit more than you, but maybe somebody who's not in your core subject area. to really kind of expand yourself a little bit. But I think looking in your local world and asking for help.
I want to second what Gail has said. I mean, firstly, I think it's a bad thing that I can't speak for all of education, but universities moving from more full-time to more adjunct is actually a bad thing. Not that there aren't very good adjunct teachers, but I think it's really bad for these adjunct teachers in terms of long-term career development and building themselves. So to build on something Gail said, what I think is really important when you belong to an institution, form your own learning community within that institution, right? And those could be, people senior than you, junior. It's a group of people who, just as teachers teach, you need to have this learning community which introduces new ideas. Someone's tried something in class, it doesn't work, bring it to the community. And I think that's perhaps a more valuable form of professional development than many of the other things which are offered.
Yeah, perfectly agree with you. Perfectly agree with you. It's the community of practice, the learning and development. Sometimes your colleague has materials already, has resources, has networks. So it gets to you much faster compared to, attending probably a more formal training or so. But in a cheaper way also, and more comforting way, because there's the bonus of friendship and connection, aside from learning, of course, learning more and being better. So yeah, just keep on learning, no matter how you think it's not that relevant right away or not useful right away. But the thing is, you just stay curious. That's the way to go.
And take that, you can almost take that full circle from where we started. In your class, don't be afraid to fail. I have tried things with students that just crashed and burned. The whole class was just awful because we wanted to try something and it didn't work. Well, we know it didn't work. Now we can try something else. Don't be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Something that Cheryl said, and also, we're talking about this lifelong learning mindset. To be interesting, you need to be interested. And so that's more than anything what you're modeling to your students. You just don't get up in front of the room and expect them to think, oh, wow, this is an interesting resource of information. What you're modeling for them is how to be engaged with something that you enjoy and love. And so my recommendation for everybody is whatever you're learning, whether it's the tech tools or transferring yourself to the virtual world, do it through the lens of what you already know and you already love, because all of you out there already know stuff. Nobody's asking you to throw away everything you know and start over. This is just a process of building on who you already are.
Great. So with that, let me just get right into the Mentimeter questions. We've got a whole bunch of questions there. At the moment, we have almost about 80 different questions. Now, a majority of the questions, surprisingly, in fact, I would say almost half of the questions are quite similar. For example, a lot of people have been asking, is there and I'm just repeating this verbatim, is there a necessary platform used to make a teacher stay relevant? And for me, I would just like to say off the bat, of course, version 2 is coming up. Please sign up, because that is the platform that's going to keep you relevant, because we have all the professional development you need on that. And we have a full community of teachers, a community of practice, like what Cheryl and Dr. Preman mentioned. To build that community of practice, you can actually do that virtually online with teachers from all around the world. So that's coming in. We're about, I would say, about 30 to 40 days away from launch. So that's coming in very shortly. So that's basically taken care of half of the questions on the Mentimeter. So let's look at the other half now. All right. So the first question that I have is, this is a pretty interesting one. How can we continue the interest of all stakeholders in order to continue funding the education sector? Because without the funding, even if teachers want to be relevant, they might not be able to. Anyone?
Well, I think that it speaks to, again, we were talking about community just a few minutes ago, and I think it's about expanding the community to include parents in a different way and maybe a different role, and other experts in different market niches or areas of learning, and bringing them in to be part of the process. And I think it's a very kind of flat, hierarchical kind of experience now, how decisions are made in schools and who makes them and all that kind of stuff. But I love the question. You really kind of need to expand who's, involved in saying what happens.
Well, and I would take that expansion in a little different way as well. I absolutely agree with you, but also you're not teaching in isolation. So get involved in your community. When I was at the University of Illinois, I had my honor students get involved with the local high schools. And because these students were scared, the high school students, they didn't want to approach the university. It was this big, monolithic university. So if these are the kids who are, helping at your track practice, who are going and applying different things, who are helping tutor, who are doing all these different things, then they're having an impact on the community. So if your class can have an impact on the broader community, then you're going to get more people who are involved and invested in the success of your class.
And perhaps this will not be the most popular answer among administration at educational institutions, but not every university has to have an expert in everything all the time anymore. Because now we've got this technology that we're talking about, and maybe I'm great at a certain programming language, but there's somebody at a university in Michigan and they're great at a different one. Well, they can teach to my students and I can teach to theirs. There's no reason that we can't, all play nice with the technology and things that we've got now and fill these market gaps that we all have. Especially here, I'm speaking more for the United States, but we have to compete with other universities. Here in Louisiana, especially, we're competing with 11 other public universities for students. And sometimes the answer of everybody offering everything is not the way to go, especially with money the way it is these days.
Right. Any other thoughts before I move to the next question?
I think really well said already. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me move to the next one. Again, this is it's a mixture of a couple of questions, but the ideas of these questions are generally the same. A couple of years ago, nobody thought that Netflix would be the place that everybody goes and watches movies. It has literally changed the game as far as entertainment is concerned. How can we be sure that this won't happen to education as well? Because nobody expected Netflix a few years ago, and here we are. And even though the panelists are saying that technology might not take over, how can we be sure? Because we don't even know what jobs are coming into the future. So how can we be sure about how technology is going to evolve?
In a way, Netflix is already happening to us because of the recommendation learning pathways. Like, it's practiced already in the industries. Like for the upskilling of employees, they have the learning pathways, and I think universities are being, sort of pressured to accelerate their own schemes of doing learning pathways, more personalized approach, and probably a little bit to catch up would be the basic education, because that would mean a lot of resources also. But it's happening already. I would say, and I'm a bit sad to burst the bubble. Sorry.
Well, yes, go ahead, Dr. Freeman.
So the Netflix analogy is an interesting one. So Netflix has made video on demand something, and that's not something which existed before. You needed to record something and go to movies, but Netflix also has pretty good content. It makes good content. If they did not make good content, I doubt they would have survived. So to use that as an analogy, I don't know what the next big thing Akadasia would be, 5 years from now. But end of the day, the principles which underpin what is good content, as in good movies. It has to be good education. It has to have interesting problems. It has to have opportunities for interaction. There must be feedback, right? These things need to be there in whatever platform for it to be successful. And plus maybe a few other things that we don't know about yet, right? But the core stuff needs to be there.
So basically, I think you just answered the question, like, how do you make teachers relevant? This is exactly how the teachers can be relevant, right? By making sure that we have all of these things that you just mentioned as part of our instructional design and as our curriculum. And also, perhaps, since Netflix was brought up, maybe this is something else that we might want to consider. That could it be, again, this is a question to all the panelists, could it be that the future of education may not be education, but more like edutainment?
Edutainment, yes, absolutely. But there are edutainment
That's
already.
not a new theory.
It's not.
I know, but my question is, I mean, it's still not largely, it's largely, especially in Asia, it's not a very prevalent thing. Moving forward, do you think it might change?
Well, the concept of edutainment is not new, but the form it might take might evolve. So let's say, what if Netflix has a education channel? So then they need content providers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and think about things like augmented reality. Are y'all all familiar with augmented reality? One of the first demos I saw of it was with these little cubes that had elements on them. And in the augmented reality, you put the elements together and it would make a compound. So I think that more things like that will come along as technology continues to evolve. And especially, we talk about the digital natives. They're going to just eat stuff like that up.
Right. So, Eddie, I'm really glad that you brought up augmented reality and also virtual reality. We haven't really talked much about that, but I think that is how you take flat information and really make it immersive. So I think I agree with you. There's going to be a lot more of that already. I mean, it's already happening in the medical field. But I think in education, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, it's interesting, Gail, that you bring up the medical field, because there's all these technologies. I have this wonderful watch that can take an EKG, and I had to wear a heart monitor because I'm having some issues right now. And if it was just sending the heart monitor in and having AI come back and tell me this is what I need to be done, no, because I'm not normal. That doesn't shock anybody. So I want to have that human interaction. So if they say you must do these things, I can say no, that won't work for me. And AI doesn't necessarily give that. So as I think the way the teachers really, really, really stay relevant is to hit the 4 C's of 21st century education. Communication, critical thinking, collaboration, creativity. AI is great, but AI wouldn't exist and wouldn't continue to get better if we didn't have people with those skills making AI better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you mind if I just say something about edutainment very quickly? I think it's great that if it allows more choice and that becomes entertaining for people, I can choose what I'm interested in, but not at the cost of depth into the topic. And I think that I really honestly believe this. You do anything deeply and it does become interesting. I think that the challenge is edutainment to give people choice so they can choose what they want to spend some time on. But then the thing is, you still need them to go deep so they really find it interesting for the rest of their lives.
Right. So I'll just go on to the last question. Again, it's a combination of several similar kind of questions. And this is primarily related to professional development and mentoring. So generally what the questions state is that a lot of the panelists are suggesting that in order for the teachers to stay relevant, the teachers must, be lifelong learners and consistently find opportunities for professional development. Now, from a management perspective at schools, the big challenge is to convince teachers to actually sit through these programs and complete them and then apply what they have learned into their own teaching and learning practices. Considering the fact that teachers are extremely busy, how does one at a management level tell the teachers that, hey, listen, this is important? Do I give financial benefits, or do I give other or should we kind of use a stick kind of a method to kind of tell teachers that you must complete professional development, which may not achieve anything in the long run? So what are your practical viable suggestions on getting management to get the teachers to sign up for professional development programs so that the quality of education can improve and they themselves can be relevant?
Can I go first? I know that it's going to be a headache for, especially for finance administrators of a school or a university. But I think what a way to go is to have a +1. Like, for example, you have the professional component, but they're open to that +1, wherein they have this personal interest, personal growth. So, and that will enrich what the teacher is bringing to the table. It's not just the professional side of it, but that added value to the teacher, the +1. I'm not sure how it's going to be financed. I know that it's a bit expensive, but probably some partners would be interested, some funders would be interested, and would recognize the benefit of having that +1 for teachers' personal growth and professional development. Mm-hmm.
I would say ask the teachers. We go in this thing where we assume that, okay, I want you to do this. Eddie, I want you to do this. And I'm going to give you, I'm going to buy you lunch if you'll do this. Well, what if what you want isn't lunch?
Right.
So I shouldn't assume what you want or what you need out of this. I think that educational leadership really needs to listen, to actively listen to the teachers. Don't assume you know what they need necessarily. And teachers, you need to, reflect and be honest with what you actually need.
Kirsten, I agree with that really 100%. And I think there is I don't want to call it a compensation, let's say, currency, to show that teachers' time does have value. So when something has value, there's a compensation that goes on. And I really agree that it's been very top down with all assumptions of what the teacher is, what they need, and all that. And I think depending on the political situation that the teacher is in and the school they're in, might be more challenging sometimes to speak up. But I think if we want our kids, this is another modeling situation, if we want our kids to have a voice, I think teachers need to also find their voice as well and share the best they can what would benefit them so that they can benefit the school better and ultimately benefit the kids or the students.
Dr. Preman, I think this is something right up your alley.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I've just nothing else to add other than the fact that administrators trust your teachers, right? They know what's good for them, right? So if they want to clock hours as learning community or communities of practice hours as professional development, make it happen.
So actually, I think one thing that I would actually add to that all these answers is perhaps it's a good time for the management at the institutions to also consider signing up for professional development themselves, because the management practices are changing. We are basically, moving into a whole new way of working. I mean, everybody's working remote. Maybe management needs to also upgrade together along with the teachers. And so, I mean, from a leadership perspective, I know, I mean, as a CEO of Akadasia, and even in my previous roles, as a team leader or as a manager, you lead from the front, right? You basically roll up your sleeves and you get your own hands dirty. And if you do so, then your staff, your colleagues, your peers will go like, hey, listen, if this guy's putting in so much effort, perhaps we should do so. Right. Because if the boss is doing all the work and if I'm not, then that's a problem. So maybe
if there's something you want, you want as an employer for your employees to do and you're doing it with them, it makes a whole lot of difference. especially, you know, with all of these trainings and things that we end up having to go to. It makes you feel a lot better if you know they're sitting there next to you doing the same things. So they at least understand your pain, if nothing else.
Yep. Great. So that's all that we have for the questions from Mentimeter, and I will pass the session back to Kirsten to wrap it up.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your questions, Neil. And thank you, panelists, so much. Before I summarize this for everyone, do you have any final thoughts? Let's just go around and each of you, please, parting words, final thoughts. Please, Gail.
I personally appreciate whoever is watching this in real time or is watching it after the fact, that you made the time to enroll in something, to partake in something that might not necessarily be your core subject. I think it's a great step forward. And if it is a step forward, continue to the next step. Don't let this be your first step and your last step. All the things we talked about, look for help, create community. You might feel like, oh my gosh, I'm the only one, but you know, there's thousands of people that signed up for this. You're not, I promise you, you're not the only one that feels the way that you do. And I personally am really excited. I'm also going to be offering a course in STEAM education on Akadasia. So I look forward to seeing you there.
Excellent.
Maybe just quickly, with all this technology, just remember that teaching and learning is a human endeavor, right? So talk to your friends, talk to your co-teachers, be a human being with your students, right? I think that's probably what makes it worthwhile.
I've said it twice, but I think it's worth repeating. Don't be afraid of the technology. Don't be afraid to get your hands wet. Don't be afraid to fail. This stuff changes all the time. Realize that, at the point we're at now, change in technology is inevitable. There have been lots of studies that say, especially from the technology standpoint, we've got to try to prepare students for jobs that don't exist yet. So just don't be afraid. Get out there and try and learn and enjoy it.
Same thing. Same here. Don't be afraid that you'll become irrelevant. Just keep on learning. Just stay curious. You'll find ways of applying it later on. So you'll stay relevant no matter what happens. So, and of course, don't forget to be the compassionate others for your students. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much. I thoroughly enjoyed the panel. I'm going to try to summarize some of the key points. The idea of the fact that you are a curator as a teacher and you are, really helping your students, that you need to be a lifelong learner. And maybe one way to look at it is by upskilling yourself, by renewing your passion for learning, you're going to re-energize your passion for teaching. And you're in this as a community. You are not in isolation. None of us learn or none of us teach in isolation. So get involved, get actively involved with the community, because teaching and learning are at their core human endeavors. Be genuine to who you are when you're teaching and learning, and don't be afraid. You're going to make a mistake. We all make mistakes. That's okay. In fact, one of the most valuable lessons you can show your students and you can model for your students is what happens after you fail. Failing is never an endpoint. The human condition, we need mentors. We need people to invest in us. Your students need you to believe in them. And that is how you will always be relevant, because we need you. And I just want to say thank you again, Neil, and I'm going to turn it back to you if you have anything else to say. And you're muted.
I did a Rax, sorry. But thanks, Kirsten, and thanks to all the panelists. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate your time and the knowledge that you've shared with us today. I think from the comments that we are getting from the various social media channels. I think the audience is quite enjoying the discussion as well. I think to the audience, I would only like to say is that what you do as teachers is perhaps the most important profession in the world, because without the teaching profession, we may not have any other profession. So so keep it up, and I do understand that the times are very challenging, but as human beings, we have persevered even worse conditions. So I'm sure we will persevere as a collective, and the only way to kind of move forward is to be positive and keep on looking at ways and means to stay relevant in the upcoming future. Having said that, I would also like to invite all the teachers to sign up for a free lifetime membership on the Akadasia website. So we are about 30 to 40 days away from launching the second version of FREEJOO. And this particular version will now come with more than 60 to 70 different professional development courses developed by us at Akadasia. And we are also inviting other partners to develop content for it. So in fact, we've got content coming in from Julia Gabriel Education in Singapore, from Makerology. Gail's right here, and we are talking to a whole other range of universities in Singapore and in the United States to put their content on the platform as well, so that you, the teachers, actually have access to learning at any time from anywhere. And more importantly, we also understand that sometimes language becomes a big stumbling block if you want to learn. Maybe you might not have enough content available in your own local language. So to solve that, what we are also doing is all the content is available, apart from in English, in Filipino, in Vietnamese, in Bahasa Indonesia, and in Hindi. And so all the content, every single lesson will be available in all these languages as well. So again, the teachers, if you want to learn, if there is a willingness to learn, we are basically providing you with a platform which you can actually sign up for and learn. In terms of community of practice, in fact, there is a social networking element that is coming in on the platform as well. So you can actually build your own communities of practice, not just from within your own school, but literally with any other teacher from around the world. So you could pretty much have, an international network. You could learn from anybody from around the world. So the bottom line is, it's how hungry are you to stay relevant? It all boils down to you at the end of the day. And I also want to kind of invite you all to attend our next virtual fireside chat on August 11th. The registration link is here. And that is going to be a continuation of the theme of teachers as lifelong learners. And the next chat is basically going to be talking about building international networks and linkages, and to kind of help you with your own teaching practices. So it's again going to be a pretty interesting talk, and we've got other speakers for that. And of course, I know a lot of the teachers are patiently waiting to know whether they're getting their e-certificates. So yes, e-certificates will be provided if you complete the exit survey. So the link is here. And of course, my team is already putting in the links in the YouTube chat and the Facebook chat. So please click on those links, and you should be able to get your e-certificates right after you complete the exit survey. And with that, thank you very much, everybody. I really, really appreciate all your time and your support. And without your support, we can't be doing what we are doing today. So thank you very much to all the panelists, to Kirsten, to Roy, to Rax, and the rest of my team moderating on YouTube and Facebook. And we all are looking forward to working with you, to supporting you in your journey. And of course, we look forward to welcoming you again on August 11th. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.